Janet Silver. On Tuesday, Finance Minister Chrystia Freeland tabled her government's 8th federal budget. What are the Liberals' spending priorities and who will benefit the most? Joining me to unpack the budget are two of my colleagues here at Syntax, Marjolaine Provost and Jake Enwright. And Jake, let's first discuss this in terms of big picture. Was this a big spending budget?
It was. I think it took a lot of people by surprise that the government is spending $40 billion more than it has this year. And that's because of increased revenues due to inflation. We saw that really bring down the size of the deficit in Ontario. The government had signaled early that it was going to be a prudent budget. $40 billion in this environment, more than you can afford, is not a prudent budget. And I guess it would lead us to conclude that Chrystia Freeland was not managing expectations very effectively in her pre-budget messaging.
You spoke of going into the budget. One of the other things that the finance minister said that one of their priorities for this government was going to be affordability. Marjolaine, I'm wondering what is in this budget that addresses affordability?
I think there's a number of measures that they've implemented. There are a couple of one-time payments to populations that have a certain threshold income, namely one that is focused on helping Canadians reduce their grocery bills. And I believe there's a number of tax cuts that are sprinkled throughout. So those are some measures, but I wouldn't say that it's the top priority though.
Dick, I just want to pick up on something that Marjolaine said. She spoke about the what people are calling the grocery rebate, which means if you're a single person, you get about $234. A couple with 2 children get $467. A senior citizen would get about $225. Is that good politics, Jake?
It's good politics. It's bad policy. I don't think anyone would argue that the grocery rebate, quote unquote, will be all that meaningful for people struggling with the increased cost of food. But that's exactly what the Prime Minister and the Deputy Prime Minister want a Conservative MP to say, and preferably say it out loud in front of a camera so they can put that into an attack ad in the next election. The real danger on affordability is things for the Conservatives, is things that the Liberals have already done, like childcare. People can't miss what they don't have. And if the rebate is a one-time thing, Conservatives attacking it really won't matter in the fullness of time. Where the Conservatives will be more hard-pressed when it comes to affordability are on things like I mentioned, childcare, but also dental care. Conservatives ideologically are opposed to this policy, but at the end of the day, if people have this for 1-2 years, then there's an election and the Conservatives aren't committing to keeping that plan, that is going to have a lot of effect on their ability to meaningfully communicate an affordability narrative that puts themselves ahead of the Liberals. It was the number one challenge in 2019 was an affordability narrative that the Conservatives ran on, except their policy was outmatched by the Liberals in that regard.
You said dental care, and that takes me to the next topic that I want to get into with Marjolaine, that's healthcare overall. So we know that dental care was in there. I'm wondering what else was in there, because the government announced, earlier this year that it had a deal, the agreements with provinces about $196 billion over 10 years to increase those health transfers. So what more was in this budget to address some of the healthcare concerns?
So as you mentioned, the government it kept the $198.3 billion increase through the transfer, and that's over 10 years. That's in the budget, but that also includes $46.2 billion in new funding for provinces. And they're focusing generally on oral care, which is wider than the dental care benefit. There's $250 million over 3 years and $75 million ongoing for the Oral Health Access Fund. And of course, we all know that there is a healthcare workforce crisis. And so they're addressing that through a number of ways. There's a number of incentives for doctors and nurses to practice in rural communities. And if they do that, they will have a bigger portion of their student loans that become forgivable. And they're also investing in like suicide prevention. There's an amount for the creation of a suicide prevention line, sexual reproductive health investments, opioids crisis. So there's I would say a significant number of investments going into the health portfolio, because we know that Canadians' health, specifically mental health as well, has suffered in the last couple of years.
And Jake, you had mentioned earlier that this was a big spend. So I'm just gonna get you to put on your political hat for a moment. Are we spending too much? Can we afford this?
We can afford it. I think that a G7 country with a AAA credit rating can borrow lots and lots of money, but eventually, something's going to have to be done to rectify the issue. We can't keep spending $40 and $50 billion more than we have every year. Obviously, the government has now said that it's going to not balance the budget. This is now the second time in its mandate that the Liberal government has canceled plans, I guess third technically, canceled plans to balance a budget, if you're counting the original promise in 2015. We can afford it. It's leading us to a place where something has to give, and you either have to reduce spending or raise taxes. That's the only two ways out of it. Both are, politically convenient for the Liberals to charge against the Conservatives in an election campaign, maybe sometime in the future.
What is the official opposition saying about this budget? I don't expect they're going to support it. Would that be correct?
No, the Conservatives won't support it. The NDP came out the door and immediately said that it would support the budget because of the investments in dental care. Look, working backward, the NDP are taking credit and claiming that when they have power, they put people first. What Jagmeet Singh and the NDP don't realize is that constituents don't give credit to opposition for government policies. This is the brilliance of the Liberal coalition they've struck with the NDP. That's not just me saying it. Jagmeet Singh's been taking credit for things for a year and he's not up in the polls. So at what point do they abandon that approach? I don't know, but it's never worked in the past. It's not working now. The Conservatives obviously opposed the budget because of the deficit spending and the increase in taxes, although it should be noted that the Liberals capped excise tax on beer and wine and spirits, which was a major point of contention leading up to the budget. But Pierre Poilievre went out and spoke on crime today instead of the budget. And so that tells you two things. One, he is not going to be fooled and tricked into the traps that are laid out in this budget, such as dental care, such as groceries. And secondly, it could also indicate that, Conservatives don't have to talk about the economy. They have won that issue. In the last election, Conservatives won that issue. It just wasn't the issue at the ballot box. So he's, instead of focusing on tapping into other issues, not this one, for the two reasons I mentioned.
Marjolaine, you were saying earlier that this doesn't necessarily mean specific priorities in this budget, if you will. Were there any surprises, though, in the budget, that things that came out that you weren't expecting?
I don't know if they were surprises, but one investment that I'm particularly happy about is, and that the FCA, the Fédération des Communautés Francophones et Acadiennes, have applauded, is a nice amount for la francophonie, for development and protection of official languages in Canada, of course the French language, and any minority setting language communities. That it was expected, but it's been a long time coming, and a lot of groups have been waiting for these investments. So that will definitely go a long way for the Liberals in terms of getting the support from those communities.
And Jake, just to flip that then, finally, are there sectors that might be disappointed with this budget?
Certainly I think anyone working in biofuels would be disappointed slightly. The government, announced that it's going to be consulting on how to grow the industry with increased demand for renewable energy. I think some folks in that sector roll their eyes because the government's been consulting on biofuels for well over 5-6 years now with the clean fuel regulation. So it's a bit unclear what the intention is there, but at the end of the day, that's a good nod to some folks in the downstream energy retail space who are looking for the government to help them invest in site infrastructure that can better handle renewable energy, which is quite hard and quite damaging and corrosive to existing fuel infrastructure that you would typically see at a site. So there's some hope there, but also some confusion and disappointment about why we're going back to the drawing board.
Well, we'll see what happens at the drawing board. That's all the time we have for today. Thank you to my colleagues, Marjolaine Provost and Jake Enwright. I'm Janet Silver. Till next time.